party, close the blinds, put the kids to bed, put the dog outside. This is the one you're going to like lock in and be totally here for the whole time. We are incredibly fortunate and lucky and grateful to have Jordan Harbinger here. Jordan's done a few things in his life. He's now got a podcast. It was named the Podcast of the Year in 2018 by Apple. He has about 6 million downloads a month, so just a few. He speaks 5 languages. He has been called the Larry King of podcasting. And if you ever listen to his podcast, and I've been listening to it for a good 3 years now, you will know why. He has an impressive list of guests: Kobe Bryant, just dozens of Ray Dalio, dozens of excellent guests. And his real joie de vivre, or the thing that lights him up, I think, is getting people to help distill their excellence and their peak of their knowledge together. So it's an amazing podcast. Please join, log in, watch it every 3 times a week. I do. It's unbelievable. But today we're turning the tables. We're gonna have the opportunity to interview him a little bit about burnout and some of the things that are important to our audience, which are physicians who are in burnout or have lots of other things going on. So Jordan, thank you. And I just can't say enough, but thanks for being here. And the first question I had for you is, I think you've been kidnapped twice. So that I don't know if that stimulates burnout, but it definitely stimulates some stress. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, those were just sort of like knucklehead moves as a kid. So once I was not a kid, but once I was 20, I got into a fake taxi in Mexico City. That's a thing that happens a lot, actually. So I wasn't strictly alone in that. That turned out to be like, I don't even know what it was going to be. Possibly 2020 hindsight, just a botched robbery probably, but I ended up getting in a physical conflict with the cab driver. Now, I was 20. All I did was work out twice a day and eat carne asada and do karate. And he was, I don't know, 50 plus and sat in a cab all day eating carne asada, probably also, given that it was Mexico. And so he just didn't stand a chance. You know, I was young and fit and he was old and fat. So, I mean, that was, speaking of maintaining your health, if you're going to go around kidnapping people, you should probably be in better shape. So that I ended up escaping from. The second time was 4 or 5 years later. I was in Serbia, which is a great place. And I had some run-ins with their national security service because they thought I was a spy because they're idiots. And they arrested a friend of mine and myself. And they took us to like a safe house where they could bother us. And I basically just played these morons. They were drunk off of their gourds, so they were really vulnerable, and they were doing drugs, which is not actually that uncommon for a lot of these guys. So they were doing drugs, and I eventually convinced them that I was having serious health issues, and they needed to go and get me something to drink, or I was going to run into more problems. And then they left, and then I left. So I mean, just dumb stuff, but still scary. And now that I'm 40, I'm like, wow, I almost died. You know, back then I was like, wow, that was ridiculous. These guys are crazy. Cool. Let's go to the cops. What a story, you know? And then, but now I'm like, ooh, yeah, if that ever happened to my kid, I would lose my, you know what?
Exactly. All right. So I want to rewind a little bit. I want you to go back to the time when you were graduating from law school, from Michigan. And you never actually practiced law, correct?
I did practice law for 2 years, or a little longer than 2 years. It's a good question. Not entirely sure. About 2 years. It's been a long time now since then, almost 15 years.
So then the question is, and one of the real reasons why I want to talk about burnout is because clearly you were able to know within yourself or assess that like 20 years from now, 40 years from now, you're like, I will hate myself if I spend the rest of my life doing this. So like, I don't know if you had a process or if you can explain what you went through when you decided you're like, I'm punching out. I'm getting out of the legal profession. Because I think one thing in medicine, people get trapped and then they're
we called this at the time on Wall Street, we called it the golden handcuffs. And essentially what that was exactly what it sounded like, where you go, well, I don't really want to be a lawyer, but man, the job market's always tough and I want to make money. And they're offering me $160,000 a year plus $30,000 bonus. So I'll just be a lawyer for a few years. That was my thought process. And then I had a forcing function, which was I joined the real estate department of a derivatives firm whose primary clients were investment banks that went out of business in the real estate department. So they were like, we're laying everyone off. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because a lot of people who had more experience in that department, they moved to other firms, other jobs, and then other people that worked in different types of things like financial derivatives or litigation, their jobs were more or less okay. Some of them had layoffs, but more or less they landed on their feet. I was like among the few that went, I'm going to specialize in mortgage-backed securities, and my clients are going to be Lehman Brothers and, whoever else. So
nothing will ever happen,
Yeah, this has been so stable, and everyone says this is stable, stable, stable. And all the lawyers and all the partners say this is the stable and this is where the money is. And that was like, boom. And I just thought, oh, well, and other people were panicking, but I was just like, hey, look, getting laid off with 9 months of severance from a job you never wanted. Okay, there are worse things, So I really ran into some luck with that. But the golden handcuffs was what a lot of people ran into, where they go, I don't want to be a lawyer, but I'm going to be a lawyer. They pay off their loans in a few years, or they make dents in it. And then they're like, I'm going to get a condo in Manhattan. And then they're like, ooh, but I need a summer home in the Hamptons. And now I need a boat. And then I'm getting married. And then but my wife doesn't want to work because we're going to have 2 kids and I'm going to send them to private private Manhattan schools. So then suddenly you're like, not only do I have to be a lawyer, I can never quit, because my nut that I need every month is kicking around at 30 grand or whatever it is. Right.
Yeah. I mean, and we kind of talk about that too. Like, I almost think it's like the golden handcuffs attached to the golden treadmill, and now you're really stuck and you got to keep running. The same thing with medicine. People kind of unfortunately scale their lifestyles to their income. And then you're like, wow, reimbursement's going down in medicine. So I got to work harder. Well, now, and again, you're fueling that burnout fire. You're really in trouble. But I also feel like you had other interests, other ventures that you're already pursuing, even when you were in law school, that I think probably, like, maybe you didn't know it, but you're like, that became like career number 2, leading to career number 3, leading to career number 4. So, take me through that process. I think a lot of doctors are so focused. They're like, that it's so hard to get into med school. Then you're in med school, you got to work so hard. It's hard in residency. And I think it doesn't leave any time for any alternative thinking or any option B planning,
Exactly. I started doing the podcast, the Jordan Harbinger Show, or the precursor to the Jordan Harbinger Show. Yeah. And people were saying things like, hey man, you better stop doing that when you get a job. And I thought, why? And they said, well, this doesn't look good. You're moonlighting essentially. You're not supposed to have a public profile as an attorney. That's not like a law profile. So if you're sitting here and you're doing a podcast and you're interviewing a jewel thief, former jewel thief or an undercover FBI agent who busted the mob, you're not really doing mortgage-backed security, financial derivative, personal branding. It looks hokey. Right. It looks like you're the bowling alley lawyer, you're the hoverboard dentist. Like we all, you see those sort of things in the news. It's not good for a white shoe law firm. Like these fancy Wall Street firms were not interested in that. Luckily, the firm that I was at was a bunch of hardcore New Yorker Italian guys. And they were like, oh, you're going to go do your radio show on Friday? Hey, Fancy Boy's going to go do his radio show. Let's put it on the speaker in the conference room and we'll all call in. So they would be like crank calling my live call-in radio show when I got picked up by Sirius XM radio. And the partners would play jokes on me like, you better go to Pete's office. Pete's mad. He's fuming. He heard about your radio show. And I'd walk in there and he'd go, I heard you got a radio show. Well, how come we didn't know about it? And I'm like, and he's like, you better give us, you better give us the phone number so we can call in. I need some advice, and I was just like, oh, thank God, this is like not a big deal, because HR was like ratting me out to them and they were laughing about it, but it really could have gone the other way.
Yeah. Well, and that's cool. That's cool because I know those firms, it's all about their reputation. Like you have to be seen as like above reproach and you're the go-to people and you can't have some kind of wild card off whatever gallivanting around doing a podcast, which at that time I'm sure was like, they were like, what's that? It's a radio show? Like, what are you talking about?
So I'd been picked up by Sirius XM satellite radio, so they kind of got it. They were like, oh, he just does a radio show every Friday night. So on Fridays I'd run from Wall Street, run, walk, bike, whatever, from Wall Street to Times Square, do my radio show for an hour and a half. And
And
then
then,
if there was more work, I'd just pop back in the office. But usually they were like, we'll just come in tomorrow at 10 a.m. We'll see you then.
Yeah.
So it didn't really matter. It's not like I was leaving at 1 p.m. 5 days a week to go do a radio show and I was done for the day. Like they just didn't care. And then once we had no work, which was for like the whole 2007, 2008, it was like the whole, I think it was like May 2007 or 2008 or whenever that started slowing down through 12 months and change till I left. So they were saying things like, you don't even really have to show up. You know, you're supposed to be sort of job hunting. You can work with other lawyers in the firm if you want to. And I was like, I'm just going to do my show. And they were like, hey, whatever you want to do, man. And they're still paying us full salary and benefits. So I was like, this is basically like Runway startup capital, except for I don't have to go to work. So it was like the sweetest deal ever because the firm didn't want to ruin us. They knew we had loans. They knew we'd moved to Manhattan from freaking Ann Arbor, Michigan to take this job. So they were like, we're just going to keep paying you for the next year. So I ended up with like the sweetest deal ever. Go ahead and make your whatever it was at the time, you know, it's 160 grand a year, no bonus, obviously. And you can keep your office, which I didn't even need. And they were like, and so I used that to float the company and it worked out really well. So my initial start was not about burnout. It was like dodging that burnout that everybody else had. Because a lot of my lawyer buddies who left, they were like, you figured it out. You know, they left early. But I've got lawyer buddies now who are just like divorced, second marriage,
horrible health.
Kids, horrible health, overweight. I look at people on LinkedIn and I go, hey, do I know you? Yeah, we went to law school together. It's Raj. And I go, holy smoke, man.
You look 60. You look 70, you know.
There are people that look like they got hit by a garbage truck. And I'm like, I don't want to say anything because some of it's genetic, as you know, but some of it is not sleeping for 11 years.
20 years,
you know?
Okay, you can talk about this or not, but I'll leave it up to you. I know you had a pretty unfriendly divorce from your last podcast.
Yeah, so to be clear, it's not a marriage divorce. I broke up with my business partners, which is basically the same thing in terms of stress, I think. Maybe if you have kids, it's worse, but you know.
Yeah. Well, and I know that had to be like emotionally like pretty like tough, like it calls into question like, did I do the right thing? What's going to happen? You know, and I guess what I was wondering is, do you feel like you got into a little bit of burnout or just even depression, you know, after that, you know, what's going to happen? I'm now maybe married or about to get married with my kids. I'm 30 something.
Yeah, I was 37 and I had been married for a couple of years or a year or something at that point. And I wanted to have kids. And I'd been doing my other show for 11 years or something like that. And then we had negotiated an amicable split. And then my business partner was like, I'm just going to lock you out of everything and then sue you and say that you can't compete. And I was like, well, that's stressful and crappy, but I'm also an attorney and I have a lot of attorney friends. So I mean, it was a really dumb move. You know, pro tip, don't sue lawyers. We will crush you. Yeah. So they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees. I made sure of that. And I spent not even a quarter of that. And I competed anyway. And I just basically brought them to their knees and they ended up having to settle. But in the meantime, I didn't lose any momentum. Yeah. I started my new show, also now called the Jordan Harbinger Show. I kept going. I took all of our vendors, all of our advertisers, most of the team with me. I don't think they were expecting that. But that's what happens when you treat people the right way. You have good relationships. That's why I always say dig the well before you're thirsty and build your network before you need it. Because I reached out to the team and I go, look, I probably can't pay you guys for like 3 to 6 months. And they were like, we don't care. We're not working with these guys. Look how they treated you. We're going to work with you. Do you think you can make us whole sometime this year? And I was like, I hope so. And they were like, fine. And I said, you guys got to take outside gigs or you're not going to be able to pay the rent. And so they did. Everybody moonlit for a while. And then eventually I brought them back in, made everyone whole. And it was tough. But yeah, there were like 2 to 3 weeks where I wasn't sleeping well. I definitely had like anxiety. I don't know what panic attacks are, but I'm pretty sure that I had them. If there is like waking up at 2 a.m. and going like heart racing and being like, oh my God, like you just got awoken by a lion outside your tent. That's how it felt. And it was a slow recovery in terms of me like emotionally being like, okay, I can do this. But the business recovery, thankfully, was really quick. Again, thanks to the relationships that I had built over the last 12 years at that time. So that was a huge relief.
Yeah, I mean, you are the commodity. The relationships were with you. It wasn't with your partners. They're like, you're the talent. You're the guy. Like, it's unfortunate they didn't realize that. But I'm happy that you're your own boss. I think that's probably the best upshot of this, probably.
It was, yeah, and really, it was another good forcing function. So just as getting laid off from Wall Street was tough and was a wake up call and really hard for me, it also caused me to start the Jordan Harbinger Show and really kick my business into high gear. But then having this split with my business partners was actually really good because 2020 hindsight, of course, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But at the time you're like, no, it's not going to be great. But a lot of people who are like CEOs and experienced entrepreneurs said, you just don't know that this is the best thing that ever happened to you. But I know it is. I'm not going to belabor the point, but it is. Trust me, you should have gone solo a long time ago. And I'm like, but you don't understand. It's hard and this and that and the other thing. And then I look at it now and I go, I never would have left that sinking ship of an old company that I was in with my business partners. And I won't name check them, but let me put it this way. They're in the live events business, expensive high-end live events that involve going out all over the place and traveling and airplanes. And I'm like, so you're trying to get people to spend like $8,000 for a week of their disposable income to get on a plane, fly to Los Angeles, which is the hotspot of coronavirus right now, and then go out every night and go out and be social all the time. And I'm like, this is the single worst business to be in. So I have no doubt that they are in serious pain right now. And meanwhile, even if our amicable split that we'd negotiated, even if that had worked out, I would have been screwed because I would have been tied together with those guys for like 3 to 4 years after the split. So they would have just sank me because I would have been trying to support them and they would have been trying to support me, but they would have nothing going this way. It would be all my money going out. So them firing me turned out to be the single best thing that probably ever could have happened to me in the business. And it screwed them really, really hard because their safety net was gone. Our settlement was like, a full release. And it was just, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital that they needed to stay afloat, suing me over nothing and then getting nothing as a result. And I was just like, wow. And being able to look at a business like that from the outside is really a wake-up call. And you just go, I not only dodged a bullet, but look at what you're doing to yourself right now. You are in a boat shooting as many holes in the hull as you can. Yeah. And I'm over here building a new boat and you're not even paying attention.
They're bailing in instead of bailing out.
Yeah, it was just unbelievable. So I look at it now and I just go, what a bullet I've dodged.
So like, if you take all that like, I think the lesson for me is like, take the lemon grove and make a lemon juice company, out of it. And B, like, what do you feel like you touched on a little bit earlier, and I'm pretty familiar with it because I've gone through the course, but Jordan has a course called 6-Minute Networking. But I mean, do you feel like that was, and you're a great guy and you've had a long history in the industry prior to this breakup, but do you feel like that was like the digging the well and all of those other things you teach and talk about, that's really was your springboard, kind of, those are the skills you needed to move forward and you just applied them to yourself?
Exactly. I basically luckily I walked the walk, I guess you would say. So I practiced what I preached, and that turned out to be hugely beneficial because I think a lot of people teach courses like networking or business development or whatever, or sales, but they don't really do any of it. And I was doing it because I was in a publicly visible place, right? You can't really run a podcast and social media and a media company and then like not do any of the stuff you're talking about because somebody will find out and call you out on it. Yeah, somebody will find out and call you out on it. So I was doing all of those things. And then when I really needed those skills, when I needed to dig the well, that's the thing. A lot of the people, they don't dig the well before they get thirsty because they think, I'm never really going to be thirsty though. I'm graduated from medical school. I got my job at Kaiser Permanente. I don't need to network anymore or whatever it is. And I was like, I just better keep doing this because I don't want to look dumb. And then when I quote unquote got fired / split from my business partners, I was like, oh, well, I've been working on this for 11 years. So what would I advise someone else to do? Make 100 phone calls to the people that you've been working out your relationship with and see if you can get some help. So I launched the Jordan Harbinger Show with an explosion. I mean, that thing was like on the top 100 immediately because I had all of my friends that I'd been helping out in the past 11 years.
James Altucher.
Yeah, exactly. I had them on as guests on my old shows and my old social media stuff and on my email list. So I was like, can you mail this out? I'm screwed. And they were like, no problem. So it was like, yeah, James Altucher and Ben Greenfield and, all these guys, from comedians to business owners to make money online selling flower seeds. I mean, just random niches. Hey, my friend Jordan's got a new show, and people would go, Jordan, I listened to that guy's oh, wait a minute. Oh, he's gone. Oh, okay, here's the new show. So it was like, I went from like 30 downloads a day in my new show where I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be homeless, to like 30,000 downloads a day in my new show, like a month later because of the network. And my wife just goes, that turned out to be a pretty good use of your time, didn't it? And I was like, oh yeah. So I made the 6-minute networking course because I was like, nobody can say, oh, this is one of those bull crappy things that doesn't work, or like nobody ever did this. He's just trying to make money. I gave the course away for free, and I'm like, this is magic. This is fairy dust. Take it, and everyone take it and run with it, because this will save your bacon. And it did mine. And so now I look at it and I go, I can't believe how lucky I am that I got fired from Wall Street, laid off, and
then got sued by your partners.
And then got sued by my business partners. It's funny, the lawsuit thing, not to bore you with that angle, I'm glad that they sued me too, because at first I thought, why sue me? They're just trying to rub salt in the wound. And my lawyer goes, no, this is gold, because you technically have a non-compete. So in theory, you're not allowed to start another podcast, but since they're suing you, I'm just going to argue that that's essentially null and void, because you're going to counterclaim that you couldn't have just started it. You would have been in the wrong. But since they sued you, you're probably going to be okay. So I was like, oh, so they just nullified the only thing keeping me from taking all of the audience and all of the team and all of the money and all of the advertisers. And my lawyer was like, yeah. And I went, oh my, I was laughing all the way to the bank that day, because I just thought, it's like playing chess with somebody who's only played shoots and ladders and doesn't have all the pieces. And it was just really fun.
They like let you out of it was like your get out of jail free card, And the other thing, when you were starting, the other thing I thought about that is like, you know what? All those people you asked for help, they were happy to do it. They were like, no problem, happy to do it. And I think that's one of the things for like burnout people in general, and for doctors, they're like, they think like, I got to be like the solopreneur. I got to be the Superman. I've got my cape on, like, I'm not going to ask for help. I'm like, God bless America. Ask for help. People love to help you. They like, you've taken care of thousands of patients. Every single one of them who you've helped, they'd be thrilled to help you. Just like take off the cape, for God's sake, and let's get things handled. We had a question from one of the online folks.
Sure.
And I think it's a great question. With all these tough situations you've been through, how do you keep such a positive mindset?
I don't really. I don't keep such a positive mindset. It always comes afterwards. And so I want to be really clear about this, because I think there's a lot of folks that say things like, oh, it's all about being positive, and I'm so positive, and you just got to stay positive. Right. I don't really look, if you can stay positive, great. But I think a lot of people beat themselves up because they find themselves not being positive, and they go, oh, this isn't how successful people do it. I don't think that's true at all. I think there's tons of successful people are not positive at all. They look back and they try and remember the bright side of things. But I wasn't at the time like, oh, I'm just going to think about how this is a new start for me, and it's a chance to reset everything, and it'll all work out in the end. I was like, I'm screwed. We're going to be homeless. I'm upset. How am I ever going to restart? I'm a failure. I was doing a lot of that. I wouldn't recommend doing that. But if you're doing that, the last thing you should be doing is going, oh, I should be thinking positively right now. Like
as a solo kind of strategy.
Yeah.
Like, get on your horse.
Get on your horse and my thing was like action ends suffering. Like if you're anything like me, you're like a blender with the top off, and there's all this energy, but it's just shooting everything up to the top and landing all over the kitchen. For me, it was like, I needed to be more like the laser, focus, where I was like, okay, all this nervous energy that's keeping me awake at 2 a.m., freaking me out, making me go outside and go for 10-mile long walks and talk on the phone and like cry to my mom. I should take that energy and go on those same 10-mile walks, but have a list of 14 people that I'm going to call on the phone and be like, okay, here's what I need to talk about. Here's what I need to do. Here's what I need to have. And that was what got me doing one foot in front of the other and rebuilt the momentum. So I would say it's not about positivity. It's about action. I think there's a lot of people that just try and look on the bright side of everything. And then they sit back and kind of like wait for things to blow over, but it won't. You can't just keep thinking it's all going to be okay. Like, you have to do something about it. So trying to remain positive, it's not necessarily a waste of time, but it's not where I would focus my energy. If you naturally do that, or you're on the fence and you can tilt yourself in that direction from being negative, go ahead. It'll keep you saner, but don't sit there and beat yourself up because you're not being positive. Like, you've got enough crap to worry about,
And then do, like, get the doing going,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay. This is the one question I really wanted to ask you. As a world-class interviewer, and what do doctors do all day? We ask people questions. What's going on? How are you feeling? Whatever. As a world-class interviewer, what do you feel like the art or the science of the perfect question is?
My questions are usually, since I'm doing thousands of interviews on the Jordan Harbinger Show, like, what I'm trying to do is always I'm trying to elicit something that gets to a certain point that the audience can use. So it really depends. I want something that the audience can use. I want to get people's feelings and stories out. So I don't just ask questions based on my own curiosity. There's plenty of that. Right. But usually I know, and this is probably my legal background, but there's a famous cross-examination course the professor's long since passed, but he said, never ask a question to which you don't already know the answer. And I don't necessarily agree with that during an interview. You can be surprised that the stakes are low. You don't want to do that when you're in court. The stakes are high. But for me, I generally know the answer to a lot / most of the questions that I'm asking on the Jordan Harbinger Show. And the reason for that is because I know that story illustrates a really good point, or that question is going to elicit a drill or an exercise from that person, or a success principle.
Right.
And I want to get that for the audience. So I say ask questions, not because there's more of what you shouldn't do with questions more than what you should. Don't ask questions because they make you sound smart. There's a lot of interviewers that do that. There's a lot of podcasters and professional journalists that do this. And
when the question is longer than the possible answer, I'm like, maybe you need to back that up a little bit.
Yeah. Don't ask questions that are longer than the answer. Don't ask questions that are going to make you seem smart, and don't ask questions that are not really questions, but your opinion pretending to be a question. You're allowed to put your opinion in something as an interviewer if it works with the style of your show, but don't pretend like you're asking a question. And if you need an example of that, just go to any live speaking gig, and there's always somebody that stands up and goes, I have a question. 2-minute long rant about something. And then you can just see the moderator going, do you have a question?
Yeah. Where was the question?
Right. You want to have that question set already, and you want to get something that's for the listening audience. Think about, as a lawyer, I'm advocating for the audience, right? I'm their voice. So I'm trying not to be selfish in my question and answer. I want the audience to take something from the answer, not just me.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah.
What do you feel like your most challenging role is at this point? Entrepreneur, podcaster, dad?
Definitely dad. My son is 1, so it's on easy mode right now because he's not asking me hard questions. He wants my attention. That's the hardest part. I'm nervous for when it's like, Dad, how come this is this way? And how come that person looks like that? And how come, they're being mean to this person? And how come this doesn't seem fair? That's the stuff where I'm like, oh my gosh, how the heck am I going to answer those? That's what I'm worried about.
I think the one thing I tell you, my twins are 22 and I have a senior in high school. And the one thing I can tell you about that is I think a lot of it, they pick up by osmosis and by example. And obviously you and Jen are going to do a great job with that. But I think, I don't think you necessarily have to have all the answers, but I think it's one of those things where you'll figure it out and you'll do the best you can. And I think you're going to do really well because you're a great guy and you're in a good position. So.
Well, thank you. I sure hope you're right.
I almost can guarantee it. You're on all the right feet to start with. So
great. Thank you very much.
Like jeffmoody.com, sign up for the email list, find us anywhere, Facebook Lives, YouTube, we're everywhere like a bad rash. You can't get rid of us. I want to be super respectful of Jordan's time. This has been amazing. I really appreciate it. I think, for burned out physicians, knowing that process you go through and kind of believing in yourself, taking action, those are all things. I think sometimes people get a little trapped and they get a little timid and tentative and they think they can't do anything. So thanks for drilling that home, and dig the well before you're thirsty. That's like tattooed, I think, on the inside of my brain. So
Good. Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate
Hey,
the opportunity.
absolutely, our pleasure. Thanks so much. And